Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk, and I'm going to be here today talking about technical free diving. The slides are, yeah, there we go. First off, I'd like to thank Orlando and his wonderful staff for inviting me here today, thoroughly and loving Portugal and its people. And in my talk today about introduction to technical free diving, we'll also have a little bit of a bent on Avatar as well. So the Avatar, the movie, not the dry suits over here. I've been working with James Cameron since 2017 on the sequels 2 and 3, and these will, number 2 will be the biggest diving movie of all time. It's 3 hours of James Cameron's vision of the underwater world, and you understand him to be an ocean explorer. And so it'll be really interesting what will come out, and that will be, to me, the third renaissance of diving. Children will be going to Walmart and stores to buy their Metakain mask, fins, and snorkel. So obviously I'm under a mountain of non-disclosure agreements that thick, and I'll tell you what I can. But my talk today, I want to give you an introduction to myself and Performance Freediving International, and then talk about technical freediving, where I've used it before, what is technical freediving, what are its greatest uses, the advantages and hazards, and then obviously after the other 2 speakers, we'll have time for questions. So I'm a recovering Trimix instructor trainer. In the mid to late 90s, I had a dive shop in the Cayman Islands called Dive Tech. In that time, for 5 years, every 3 days, I was below 60 meters. I had done dives in the 175 meter range at that point. This was all open circuit. Rebreathers weren't developed or advanced enough to be able to support those types of dives unless you were going to spend $35,000. And so, but towards the latter part of my time in the Cayman Islands, we started supporting freedivers. And at that point, I started training freedivers. I trained 2 athletes to 2 national records, 2 world records. And by December of '99, I left the Cayman Islands. January of 2000, I formed Performance Freediving International. And I'm the current president and founder of Performance Freediving International and the Performance Freediving Academies. I'm a former vice president of our international sport governing body, IDA, where I developed their first judge instructor training programs. I've developed both the Canadian and the US freediving associations in the early 2000s. And 2 years ago, I joined PFI with international training. And now we have the full suite of the diving industry, recreational, technical, and freediving. I've worked on numerous projects, The Cove, which won an Oscar in 2010, Best Feature Documentary uncovering the slaughter of dolphins in Japan. I worked later on Racing Extinction. My former wife, Mandy Ray Kroc, she went on to do 7 world records in our sport. And I train a lot of unique groups. This is the Santa Cruz Marine Rescue Unit, where I train in a breath hold survival program, which led me into training 7 different special operations groups in a breath hold special operations course from 3 different countries. If you're on mission, it's at night, and you have catastrophic failure of your equipment, going to the surface is even more dangerous. And so my job is to train them in breath hold survival, what allows them to keep the cognitive ability and the problem solving aspects while on breath hold, and to increase that level of breath hold and problem solving ability. I'm the founding member and president of the Exploration Diving Society, British Columbia, where we work in all 3 disciplines: non-technical, recreational, technical, and free diving. And I also work as a performance advisor with Liminal Collective, which is about human performance in all aspects of human performance. So I come from the diving point of view, and recently I started Aquatic Survival, which is really working towards military and institutional groups in breath hold survival. In 2016, I was the Dan Rolex Diver of the Year and awarded the first freediver to be awarded that, largely for my contributions to the safety of freediving, which was really important to me all along. Done a lot of work in hyperbarics. This is from Simon Fraser University, where for 7 years in the early 2000s, I ran an advanced freediving research program to look at the adaptation of divers or swimmers, snorkelers, scuba divers into free divers. and then eventually started developing technical freediving. So this is Truck Lagoon, Chuk in 2017, where we were doing technical scooter freediving of the wrecks, and I'll show you some of the things that are applicable there. So really, what is technical freediving? It's freediving, breath hold diving using gas mixtures other than air to facilitate recovery, reduce decompression stress or risk of decompression illness. It may also reduce surface intervals between free dives, increase breath hold capability, or the safety margin for flying after diving or whatever it might be. So the history goes back to mid-90s when Tanya Streeter, who I was training to a world record at that time, had just finished a deep no limit sled dive, and I still had people decompressing in the water. And I was breathing off of someone else's 80%, just talking with Tanya, and I was the safety freediver and coach. And I jumped in the water, taking a breath of 80% to go talk to my divers who were decompressing at 5 meters. And 5.5 minutes later, talking to them in sign language and writing on slates, my buddy was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's?" And he made me look at my computer, and it was 5.5 minutes. And I felt like I was still only at a minute breath hold. And that's where it dawned on me that the obvious advantages of using oxygenated mixtures in a working environment. So there's the traditionalist, the purist, and then there's the working diver and where we can use technical freediving. So later on, by 2008, live on Oprah, I trained New York magician David Blaine, who's now doing a Las Vegas show in this sphere. And for 20 minutes, he breathed up on 100% oxygen and did a Guinness World Record of 17 minutes and 4 seconds. But in the week prior in the Cayman Islands, he had done over 24-minute breath hold. So really amazing what we can do in freediving in itself, and let alone when we take certain advantages like oxygenated mixtures, what we can have there. So by 2010, while shooting a little short video artsy piece called Defending the Vandenberg, where you see sea monkeys running along a wreck, we used 32% as our surface breathing gas to help us avoid any potential risk of hypoxia. Help us avoid potential risk, okay, not get rid of it altogether, facilitate recovery and a number of things like that. By 2015, I started incorporating technical freediving for my safety divers at a competition I run yearly called Deja Blue, where for 3 weeks, every week they're doing 5 ocean sessions, 5 pool sessions, and in those ocean sessions, they'll be doing 100+ free dives in a day to set up the rig, safety the competitors, and break down the rig. And we would use 32%. And overwhelmingly, when we ask them how they feel at the end of a day, at the end of a week, at the end of 3 weeks, there was nothing but positives to it. And while on a breath hold, they felt like they could have kept going had they been required to stay down there, should there be a delay in ascent of the athlete to the surface and things like that. So later on, I brought this into movies. I trained Tom Cruise and Rebecca Ferguson on Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. And I brought in 50% as a use. That was an all-out fight with the Marine unit to actually allow 50%. They would rather just have him take a breath on a scuba, but he wanted to do a true breath hold. And my argument was, actually, the more dangerous thing you're doing is taking a breath off scuba and then holding your breath. I said, if you're going to do that, and if you were to embolize, wouldn't you want that bubble to be oxygen that would get metabolized? And I could see the hyperbaric physician who they had brought in to maybe work against my advocation of oxygenated mixtures. The light went on as, yes, that would be a potential benefit. So later on, I trained Margot Robbie in Suicide Squad. I got to be Batman in that scene. That's my daughter's claim to fame. Her daddy is Batman, right? And then most recently, since 2017, I've been working for James Cameron on Avatar. Again, the biggest diving movie of all times. 3 hours of what you know in Avatar is them being Na'vi, and you've seen the plains Na'vi, the mountain Na'vi, and the forest Na'vi. Well, now you're going to see the ocean Na'vi, the Metakain, They're free divers. They're born in the ocean and they live in massive mangroves and they spend their life in, around, under, and on top of the water. And it's an amazing thing. And this is shot wet for wet. So what I mean by that, this isn't Aquaman. We're not hanging on ropes with a fan in our hair, making it look like we're underwater. For James Cameron, the important thing is the real physics of the world translating to you, the audience. And that meant shooting underwater. So when you see Sigourney Weaver or Trinity or Kate Winslet or whoever it would be, their character underwater, they were underwater on breath hold. And because in LA for 2.5 years, we did performance capture dots on suits, we couldn't have any bubbles in the water or the cameras would get confused with the reflection of a bubble versus the reflection of a dot. So our grips, our safeties, our stunt people, our doubles, everything was done underwater. And in fact, at one time we had 26 people under the water on breath hold doing a scene. Sigourney Weaver ran a scene, very active scene where she was underwater for 3 minutes. Her double wasn't ready for a 3-minute breath hold. And I just watched him looking at me in the background, like, when is she gonna finish this? Going through urges to breathe. And in LA alone, we did over 250,000 free dives, using mostly 50% oxygen, sometimes 80%, occasionally air if you were the staff, but depending on who you were as the actor, because my actors were 6 years old to 69 years old, some of them were very water adept people to begin with, but they were playing a character that's not supposed to be an ocean person. And some of my people had phobias of water, but they were supposed to have been born in the ocean. So my training of them was quite unique, and then employing the uses of oxygenated mixtures. So you might hear in the media where Sigourney Weaver and Kate Winslet have done breath holds of 6.5 minutes, and a lot of them in that. So that was using 50%, okay? Not 80%, but 50%. But the idea being that whatever I could get for them being face down, not moving, and using a 50%, then when the scene was gonna be very active, I know I could have half of that. So if we did 6.5 minutes, I know I've got at least 3 minutes out of that person. And some of our scenes from the working diver would be 4.5 minutes long on breath hold. By the time you get to your position, you'd hear them queue up, you'd see the action happening, them get to spot, us change them in position, and then action, and then reset, which means you're not cutting, you're just pushing the person back to their start, and they do it again, and then they leave to go back, and then cut, and then you finally get to go back to the surface from the 10-meter deep tank. Those would be 4.5-minute free dives. And one 12-hour shift, I logged 3.5 hours, just shy of 3.5 hours underwater on breath hold. So I did 3.5 hours breath holding in a tank in a 12-hour day. So that amount of work required technical free diving. So this is Deja Blue. This is the competition. It's a video. I better go past because I'm going to talk about it all anyway. 20 minutes isn't a lot of time for me. My educational system within performance freediving, there's a lot of stuff here, but you have to understand that off the intermediate level is where we get into technical freediving and breath hold survival. And we have standards and procedures for it. It is a program that we teach and have been teaching. We talk about what is it, the history, the advantages, the physiology, the oxygen types, selection procedures, equipment. We go in under the assumption that most of our people aren't scuba divers, will never be scuba divers, but they have to know about regulators, first stage, second stage, how to breathe off of it and that sort of thing. And understand this is a surface breathing program. This isn't an underwater breathing. We don't have to worry about the always breathe, never, never hold your breath, because my specialty is the always hold your breath, never, never breathe, right? We get into oxygen handling service and then procedures when technical freediving. We have a workshop dry or confined, and then we do a series of dives in the water where we're doing 3 dives minimum on a low mix, 3 dives minimum on a high mix, and then 3 dives using a high, moving to a low mix, which means we have switching procedures from high to switching to low and confirmation, just like we would do in technical diving. So I brought a lot of stuff from what I know in technical diving from early 90s to this. So we have a certification card. Brian Shreve has been trained in the proper application and use of nitrox for a bottom mix and up to 100% oxygen for recovery mix in technical freediving. So he can go to his dive shop, and if he was not one of the training people at international training, if he was a non-scuba diver, he could go to, for example, a TDI dive shop, rent equipment, get a 100% or an 80% oxygen fill, and really just being a freediver. So really, it's for the working environment. For me, I'm a purist as a freediver. I mean, the purity in freediving means you're naked, right? You've got no equipment on and you're a true purist as a freediver. But as soon as you put a mask on, as soon as you put a wetsuit on, you are utilizing things to help you better your freediving and adapt to the environment. So for me, technical freediving is for the working freedive environments and other applications. And again, these environments are very easy for the special operations group member who's working on 100% oxygen rebreather and has to go off, be it the emergency procedure or be it an operational advantage, let's say. Here you see a primary and a secondary freediver working with an athlete, and they've been breathing on 32%. They've got an extra percentage in their back pocket if there's a delay in ascent from that safety or from that athlete at that point. Or on the left side, you see that freediver using a scooter, which is attached to a pole, which is on that line like a train on a track. And that scooter is slightly positive. So that athlete is using that scooter to get to depth. They're practicing equalizing. They're getting used to compression, but they're removing the work of having to get there. And then they free swim back to the surface because they jettison all their weight. It's really about just getting to depth and adapting. And then the scooter resets itself. And in that time, that athlete will go on to a high mix to recover, shorten surface intervals, and get ready to do another deep dive again that way. So there's a lot of different applications. Where I like to use technical freediving, and this is a photo from January 2017, and I'm in Truck Lagoon, Chuk, and we're doing technical scooter freediving. So you can see on this 1 2-hour dive session, 14 dives, 46 minutes of bottom time, so averaging 3 minutes a dive. Although at 38 meters, the deepest I did 4.5 minutes. My longest was 6 minutes and 8 seconds on a wreck in Truck Lagoon. Okay, not all of it at depth, but at varying depths. And then come back to an 80% mix, shorten my surface interval, switch to a 32% mix, so go from high to low, making sure gas switching procedures are correct, calculating, recalculating surface intervals, and then going on the next dive. Or as you can see here in the 50-meter range, doing 4-minute breath holds. Now, obviously, the scooter is helping. It's reducing metabolic workload, but we're using the advantages of nitrox and high mixtures. So what are the advantages of technical freediving? It is reduced risk of decompression illness if used conservatively. Just like if you're a scuba diver and you're using an air profile, but you're using a nitrox mix, you've got that extra level of conservatism. So we can do practically the same thing. Less end of day exhaustion, absolutely, that decompression stress. Potentially reduced surface intervals. So in Truck Lagoon, we managed to reduce our surface intervals by 40% by using certain procedures. That's more dives, more time in the day. Longer breath holds, absolutely. And then potentially flying after diving conservatism or procedures, but we don't really have any modeling and science. I mean, lots of research has gone into diving reflex, but there's nothing really on surface intervals. So there's no study on that. So we have these tables that were developed a long time ago, and they break down into, you know, some rules of thumb, but I'm trying to work towards getting something more accurate because I want to take my shear water, come to the surface, say that I'm on my 80%, switch, now say I'm on my 32%, and I want to see a surface interval counting down my time to next dive, as well as my surface interval on surface, right? That's where I want to see the future of diving, is how it's integrated, because right now there's really no proper modeling, research modeling for free divers and surface intervals. So the risks of technical freediving, there are risks, obviously. Gas switching errors. If I forget I didn't switch from my 80% and now I'm going back down to, a 100-meter dive, that could be catastrophic. So we train in it. Oxygen toxicity, obviously, because of that. CO2 narcosis, high levels of oxygen, dull the chemoreceptors that are measuring the amount of carbon dioxide, which can get you to levels of carbon dioxide you're not recognizing, creating narcotic-like effects. Obviously, surface interval miscalculations, where I'm going sooner than I should be going. There's lung volume reductions. David Blaine, on his 17-minute breath hold, his lung volume reduced by 2.5 liters. So it'd be like right now, if you took a big breath and then exhale, that's the volume you'd have left in your lungs after being full, just the metabolization of oxygen. And then there's oxygen handling and O2 servicing issues. So we train people in what's the correct procedures of that. So the questions we have are, in technical freediving, we use 1.6 as our governing partial pressure of oxygen. We take it from, obviously, recreational diving, or what would be the old standards. But if you look at freediving nowadays, world record is 130 meters, 14 atmospheres on a breath hold of oxygen, air at the surface of 21%. We're already running PO2s of 2.5 to 2.8. The difference being is we've got one load of lung volume of oxygen and whatever molecules are there versus being on scuba and breathing constantly at depth. So the load is different. Air breaks. After I've been on a high mix, how long do I have to be on my low mix or being air to normalize the oxygen in my lungs? And what about to the tissues? So we currently use a 2-minute interval at this point for that. And it's working well. If I use an 80% or higher mix on the surface and I've calculated my surface interval, I can take half of that. I took that from the old days when I was technical diving and I was using an air table and it had air decompression. The rule would be if I substitute 80%, then I could half those numbers. And this seems to be working well. I'm my own data tester. I'm my own guinea pig at this point. What about equivalent air depths? My 32% at 30 meters, what's that equivalent? How does that affect my surface interval? And then obviously flying after diving procedures. So I hope that was around 20 minutes. Again, my name's Kirk Krack. I'm from Performance Freediving International, and I'd like to thank you for your time.